after Tuesday's class about a system called Dropbox, which is an easy way to synchronize stuff for a small group of people. But it does have the limitation that you don't really have the ability to independently work on the same file at the same time. And you don't really have this communication capability of letting people know what it is you are working on when you make changes. So and obviously finally Git gives you a complete history of all of the changes, so you can always see what the file looked like at any given point in time under any change set. So I just wanted to show this graph because Git is not that much more difficult than basically using a file system. And there's even for the Mac, for instance, and for Windows, there's GUIs that make it pretty easy to use Git as if you were pulling files from the file system. So on the Mac, there's something called Git GUI that you can basically bring up from any Finder window that allows you to edit and submit any kinds of changes and push them back. And so if you prefer using the user, the user interface as opposed to the command line, Git GUI is a great way to go. And the cycle of saving files and updating them is no slower than using the file system. Cool. So we talked a bit about Google Gears. Wikitrust is an interesting site to look at issues around whether the edits on Wikipedia are trustworthy or not. They've actually launched full-fledged with Wikipedia the Italian language version. So on any Italian language page, you can actually bring up, there's a Wikitrust tab where you can see the history of the edits and how reliable they are. And they've come up with a very interesting measure of defining reliability that's based on how quickly your changes do or don't get updated or reversed by other people. And then I thought I'd bring up this post from TechCrunch because it was interesting in looking at how there's a tremendous amount of activity on the web and entrepreneurs building, big systems that process lots of transactions, and at the same time, the government's having a hard time putting together transaction processing systems that deal with much smaller amounts of data. So I thought, if you're interested in helping the California government to scale, you could investigate this. But I think it's really because the time scale of the web is so compressed, and people are having to learn techniques to deal with growth in such a short period of time that there's been a lot of creativity in solving these problems. And on the other hand, banks, insurance companies, and governments are sort of generations behind on that and haven't really been able to catch up to the idea that there's an ability to do a lot of this stuff in a much faster way. So scaling government might be a good thing for us in the future. Okay, so let's do a couple of Q&A things, maybe around Teams, before we head on out. So at the very beginning of the course, I mentioned things like leaders and consultants, and I came up with replacement terms for those. I'd like for anybody who's considering doing individual projects to maybe consider themselves as free agents, and perhaps if they do a good job of implementing a particular functionality in one project, they might want to repeat that also on another project. So this idea that you're stuck with one project throughout the rest of the quarter shouldn't exist. You should feel that it's possible to move around where your interests take you.
How like an advocate ask around, for team members? So is it going to be just like an email to everyone, or?
So that's a really good question. I think what I'd like for people to do is take a look at those seven projects that are listed on the slides. The slides are already up on the website, and see if there's one that you're more particularly interested in. If there's none that really strikes your interest, maybe get back to us, send an email to the staff list. But we're going to try and make sure that you're able to interact with an advocate. So we'd like for the first communications perhaps to start from people who don't yet feel like they're involved in a project and would like to get into one.
Would it help if the advocates filled in more details on the project?
Yes. Definitely. So one of the teams, the team that's thinking of doing the document repository and claim verifier, they've come up with a few paragraphs that describe what they're doing, and they've been highly motivated to sort of produce information that describes what it is they want to do and what other people might be interested in doing on the project. So I definitely welcome ways to make sure that all of those projects and proposals can show up on our webpage in the